Do you get surprised when you hear that free speech is a Judeo-Christian concept, but in the Bible, the punishment for blasphemy is death? Do you get surprised when Christian countries claim that philosophies of mutual respect, tolerance, and democracy, clearly developed by Greek, Roman, and Indian non-Christian philosophers, as their own intellectual property?
And those values were first embedded clearly and concisely in the Ten Commandments.
Our foundational principles, certainly in Western culture, come from Christianity.
Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God of morality. The entire Western world, what we call Western civilization, is based on this understanding.
European and American culture, which is based on Judeo-Christian values, is better than other cultures. I think it's uncontroversial to say so.
Do you get a brain tumor every time someone says that Arabs invented algebra? Do you watch a YouTube video about Christian yoga and think to yourself, wow, that cough medication I'm taking must be really strong because what the No, your cough medication is fine. What you're witnessing is this little thing called cultural digestion. Beyond a point, cultural digestion can be very dangerous to a culture, and today we're going to talk about exactly why. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. Thank you very much for joining me in this new year, and to all of you, a very, very happy new year, and I hope you all have a fantastic 2023. So to understand why cultural digestion is dangerous, we first need to understand what cultural digestion really is. Cultural digestion is a term coined by Rajiv Malhotra, and according to him, it is a destructive process by which an aggressive culture steals the cultural elements of the host culture, and in the process totally distances these elements from the host culture. Let's take a real-life example. Let's imagine that your friend wrote a paper for their university dissertation. Let's say after the paper was published, you quoted some points from the paper in your own college dissertation. That's absolutely fine, no problems. Now imagine that there's another situation where even before your friend submitted their dissertation, you completely copied the best points of their paper and submitted it as your own dissertation and got credit even for your friend's paper, which was written before you. At the same time, you took no credit for any of the mistakes that were made by your friend in their paper, and hence your paper was seen as such a superior paper and your friend's paper was seen as the inferior paper, which was basically just riddled with mistakes. That is cultural digestion in a nutshell. An aggressive civilization bent on cultural digestion is basically like a predator that dismembers a defeated or non-aggressive civilization into smaller and digestible parts that it picks and chooses whatever assets and qualities that it wants to appropriate. The appropriated elements get mapped onto the metaphysical language and social structures of the dominant civilization. Historians of the dominant side reformulate the history of the people that they have digested, and the defeated or digested civilization basically becomes depleted of any cultural or social capital. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. There is a very big difference between simply being inspired by a culture, which people do, which I have absolutely no issues with, like wearing a sari or wearing a bindi, which many people do, and I absolutely welcome. There's a difference between that and attempting to digest Indian culture. So to understand that difference, we need to understand how cultural digestion actually works. The first thing is to completely disregard the culture from where you're digesting these elements. This tweet is a wonderful example of that. This video is also a wonderful example of how Indian culture is digested.
Oftentimes, worldly meditation will try to look inward. Biblical meditation is looking outward. It's looking out towards Jesus.
Because if you look at this tweet, not a single second of research went into trying to find out what the relationship between Om and yoga is. And if you look at that clip, not a single second of research went into finding out that looking inwards to understand oneself, destroy your ego, and achieve Brahman consciousness is the ultimate goal of yoga and meditation. That is the entire point. Looking outwards while doing yoga and meditation is like being on a stage trying to explain the importance of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan while at the same time doing diarrhea on stage. You know, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So in order to hopefully convince you that cultural digestion isn't some conspiracy theory being cooked up by the Indian right wing, I'm going to give you a brief history of cultural digestion in the world. But before that, we need to understand the historical Abrahamic attitudes towards non-Abrahamic cultures. Our story begins with the rise of Christianity within the Roman Empire and how it would change the world forever. The famous ancient Roman orator Symmachus once said, "We see the same stars. The sky is shared by all. The same world surrounds us. What does it matter what wisdom a person uses to seek for the truth?" This is very similar to an ancient Indian philosophy which says, "Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti," which means the truth is one. Wise people just choose to find different paths to go to the truth. However, the Christians at the time said, we don't do that here. What started within the Roman Empire when Christianity became powerful, is a widespread, aggressive assault on non-Christian culture. These attacks have been described brilliantly by historians such as Catherine Nixie in her book, The Darkening Age. The aggression against non-Christian cultures started from the very top. Persecution of pagans started from the Roman Emperor Constantine, who converted to Christianity and then wanted everyone else within the empire to be Christian as well. This tradition was carried out by the following Roman emperors as well, including Justinian, Gratian, Valentinian, and Theophilus, who persecuted non-Christians brutally. Non-persecution continued throughout the Roman Empire and even into the Byzantine Empire, where the freedom of conscience that had been a major benchmark set by the Edict of Milan was finally completely abolished. So once they destroyed Roman paganism, they turned their attention towards Greek paganism and did the same thing.
But where the old gods died, the new god would come into place. The Christians completely demolished the ancient site and reused stones and sculptures for the construction of new buildings. A more well-known repurposement of an ancient temple to a Christian basilica was that of the Temple of Athena, the Parthenon. By the end of the 5th century, many of the great pagan centers like Delphi, Olympia, Dodone, Nemea, and Epidaurus had been destroyed. Plenty of statues had the same end. Some of them were left in place after their destruction, but a great number of them were thrown in rivers, wells, and drains.
And think about it, if you remove the names of the perpetrators and the victims, you wouldn't be blamed for mistaking this story with the story of the Islamic rule in India. So why am I telling you all of this? Because knowing this background information makes what happened after this even more egregious. This is the story of the cultural digestion of pagan Rome and pagan Greece. So after spending centuries in aggressively and systematically destroying non-Abrahamic cultures, Abrahamic religions then proceeded to digest pagan philosophies and ideas that they couldn't destroy and they found useful. Let's start with the most Christian thing imaginable, Christmas, the birthday of Jesus Christ. But did you know that Christmas doesn't even appear in the Bible? Christmas came about because early believers in Christ desired to take the focus away from the pagan rituals of the winter solstice. This time of the year was celebrated as Saturnalia, which was a pagan holiday in honor of the agricultural god Saturn. Romans would spend the week of Saturnalia feasting, drinking, giving gifts, and being joyful. Even Anu Malik must be impressed by this level of plagiarism. This same ideology is why the resurrection of Christ is celebrated during the spring equinox. By digesting these popular pagan festivals into Christianity, it made people's transition into Christianity much smoother. There are many other pagan festivals that have been converted into Christian festivals, like Epiphany or Three Kings Day or St. John's Eve. See, I believe their philosophy is that it's not really theft, it's just borrowing it permanently without your permission. But it gets worse. Christianity not only digested non-Abrahamic traditions and festivals, but also central non-Abrahamic concepts and philosophies. Today, Christian countries claim that their central philosophies like democracy, free speech, free markets, secularism, tolerance of other ideologies, law-based society, and even libertarianism are based in Judeo-Christian values.
The values that resonate most with human beings are eternal, not changeable, and not relativistic. They are universal. They are not group-specific. And those values were first embedded clearly and concisely in the Ten Commandments.
Our foundational principles, certainly in Western culture, come from Christianity.
Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God of morality. The entire Western world, what we call Western civilization, is based on this understanding.
To make a rational argument, you have to start with an initial proposition. Well, the proposition that underlies Western culture is that there's a transcendent morality.
European and American culture, which is based on Judeo-Christian values, is better than other cultures. I think it's uncontroversial to say so.
That was the basic foundation of America. It was a Judeo-Christian ethic. It was a Judeo-Christian reasoning.
The Catholic Church built Western civilization.
Western civilization at large was built upon Christianity. That's a fact.
They pretend as if pre-Christian cultures didn't know that stealing and killing people was a bad thing. It's like before Christianity, people were just sitting at home thinking, I have half an hour before work. What should I do? I guess I can go kill my neighbor and steal his bicycle. Like, what the man? The truth is that the Christian rule in Europe was so bad that when the church was in control of Europe, that time was literally called the Dark Ages. And when you were CEO of the company, that time of the company was called the Dark Ages. You done f***ed up, man. And if free speech was really a Judeo-Christian concept, why was it banned in Europe during the time when the church was in charge? The reality is that the Dark Ages ended with the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment. The Renaissance, in contrast to the Dark Ages, were marked by cultural flourishing. The ideas of free speech, capitalism, capitalism, democracy, secularism, all of the concepts that made the West rich and powerful and prosperous came during this age. So what was difference between the Age of Enlightenment and the Dark Ages? Simple. The roots of the Enlightenment lie in the non-Christian Greco-Roman culture. It is quite clear that the civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome formed a common background and a major source of inspiration for the Enlightenment thinkers, artists, philosophers, and scientists, as has been highlighted painstakingly and thoroughly by authors like Stephen Greenblatt, Peter Gay, Catherine Nixie, Thomas E. Ricks, Andrew Seidel, among many others. The dominant culture of the Enlightenment was rooted in the Roman and Greek classics. According to Edward Gibbon, men and women of the Enlightenment related to, empathized, and identified with the ancient world. The late Peter Gay, who was also the first to draw attention to the importance of antiquity in 18th century Europe, defined the European Enlightenment as a volatile mixture of classicism, which means pagan philosophy, impiety, and science, and cast the French philosophers that ushered in the Renaissance as modern pagans, who found in Greece and Rome a striking antidote to their contemporary Christian culture. Moreover, according to Nikitas Sinisoglu in his book Radical Platonism in Byzantium, humanism inspired by paganism was responsible for the reformation of the church in the Byzantine Empire. Even today's sexually liberated West is much more reminiscent of ancient Greece and ancient Rome and their festivals of Bacchanalia and their bathhouses than the Christian world of the Middle Ages, who believed that sexual sensations must not be enjoyed and sex must only be performed for procreation.
How funny was that Ben Shapiro thing?
Oh my God.
The wet ass thing?
Oh my God.
That's a result of a gynecological situation.
Yeah.
Benny. Stay in your lane. Very smart guy. And when you think that wet ass pussy is a gynecological condition, whoops.
The Western countries claim that Judeo-Christian ethics are responsible for the abolition of slavery, completely ignoring the fact that India had no concept of slavery for 5,000 years. Also ignoring the fact that they used these same Judeo-Christian ethics to justify slavery in the first place. It's kind of like saying, oh, Harvey Weinstein doesn't sexually assault people anymore, which means Harvey Weinstein is directly responsible for the reduction in sexual assaults. I mean, it's kind of true, but that's not the point. The reality is that laws abolishing slavery came almost 2,000 years after the establishment of Christianity and coincided with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, which happened as a result of a rediscovery of pagan philosophy. Let's then come to the country that I believe is most inspired by pagan ideals, which is the crown jewel of the Western countries, the United States of America. America, I believe, was founded on pagan ideals. The founding generation of America was much more inspired by Roman and Greek philosophy than the philosophy of the Bible. Free speech, the crown jewel of American democracy, is a pagan ideal. Because remember, it is banned in the Bible and it was banned by the church when it had control of Europe for centuries. It is Greek, Roman, and Indian philosophies which have championed free speech, debate, and an acceptance of a variety of opinion for centuries. Tolerance, which is another celebrated American ideal. If you look at the Bible, the commandments of the Bible do not support tolerance of any other ideologies than the ideology of the Bible. It is again Greek, Roman, and Indian philosophies which have championed not just tolerance, but mutual respect. Look at another bedrock of American values, something that is even mentioned in the American Declaration of Independence, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In fact, the pursuit of happiness is the central tenet of the Epicurean philosophy, credited to Epicurus, who is a pagan Greek philosopher. This philosophy is in direct contrast to the life of repentance that Christianity advocated.
When he says, "Take up your cross and follow me, and he who wants to save his life shall lose it, but he who loses his life shall save it. He who loves his life is in danger, but he who hates his life will find his life."
In the same Declaration of Independence, when talking about where rights come from, the founding fathers write, they come from the laws of nature and nature's God, their creator, the supreme judge of the world and divine providence. Notice that there's no mention of Jesus or Yahweh or the God of Abraham. In fact, even popular American symbols, motifs, and architecture are inspired by non-Christian cultures. On the top of the US Capitol building in Washington stands a statue, not of Jesus Christ, but of the goddess Libertas, who is a Roman goddess and personification of liberty.
In fact, if you go into the Capitol Visitor Center, you'll find this particular statue of Libertas as well.
Many major American government buildings look exactly like Greek temples, not like churches. Two of the most famous symbols of America, Lady Liberty and the eagle, also have a non-Christian inspiration. Lady Liberty is modeled after the Roman goddess Libertas and Sol Invictus, and America's adoption of the eagle is also of non-Christian origin.
And here is, of course, the eagle was always by the side of Jupiter, which was the god of Rome. So anytime you saw Jupiter, you would see the eagle. He was always by his side. So America adopted the eagle, and the eagle, of course, was the icon of Rome.
In fact, coming back to the US Capitol building in Washington, if you look at the dome within the US Capitol building, it has a mural on it known as the Apotheosis of Washington, which depicts George Washington ascending to heaven, surrounded not by the Christian god, but by non-Christian gods and goddesses, including Neptune, Minerva, Mercury, Vulcan, Ceres, and Libertas. No Jesus anywhere to be seen. Even the highest gallantry awards that are given out by the American military feature non-Christian gods and goddesses.
Who is the helmeted goddess of wisdom and war. Clearly, if we click on the Navy, we'll see that there's another goddess here. This is, in fact, the same goddess, the Roman goddess of wisdom and war, Minerva.
And now we see the danger of cultural digestion, and we will see how these non-Christian motifs were then digested by Christian fundamentalists who came to prominence after the Civil War and really gained power within the US government after the Second World War. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but Roman gods and goddesses used to be on American currency notes as late as 1862. And the phrases that are currently associated with the United States, like "In God We Trust" or "One Nation Under God," these slogans were not provided by the founding fathers. "In God We Trust" appeared on one coin in 1863 and started appearing on currencies in 1956. And "One Nation Under God" was added to the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954, the same way that the words secular and socialist were added to the Indian Constitution in the 1970s and not during independence. In the last 150 years, Christianity has had a very strong influence in the political landscape of the United States. They figured that removing all these pagan motifs and philosophies would be seen as a massive insult to the founding fathers, and it might offend the American population. So they did the next best thing. If you can't kill it, digest it. And now the concepts of free speech, pursuit of happiness, rule of law, tolerance, secularism, they were all digested into the Judeo-Christian ethics, despite the founding fathers clearly being inspired by non-Christian cultures. So the reason why I told you this long drawn-out story so far was because what Abrahamic cultures did to Rome and Greece is now being done to India. And now we will talk about the attempted cultural digestion of India. Right now there is an attempt to digest Indian culture the same way Rahul Gandhi is trying to culturally appropriate Karl Marx. Yoga and meditation are both extremely popular in the Western world right now. They are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Just look at the number of meditation apps out there. And these Indian sciences and spiritual practices are currently in the process of being digested by both the left wing and the Western right wing. The Western right wing, who on the one hand calls yoga demon worship, but on the other hand digests it into a Christian practice which magically removes all demonic properties. Christianity is apparently the Tide detergent of religions. There is now a Hallow app which offers guided Christian meditation, which will free you from thoughts of Satan, premarital sex, and homosexuality. In fact, some people believe that yoga and meditation have simply been contaminated by Hinduism and Buddhism.
Unfortunately, the term yoga has become contaminated. They contaminated yoga, especially with their Hinduism and Buddhism beliefs.
Unfortunately, these outlandish claims and these attempts to digest yoga and meditation are being supported by prominent Indians themselves, like ex-Surgeon General of the United States of America, Sanjay Gupta. They're being supported by secular media in India and outside of India. They're being supported sometimes by our own gurus and even our own governments. And it's not just yoga. Even Ayurveda is being digested right now. The global market share of Ayurvedic products is expected to be valued at over 20 billion before the end of this decade. So while Western scientists and media attack India when India tries to promote Ayurveda and go as far as calling it a pseudoscience, it is being aggressively digested by those same Western countries right now. Again, while attacking Indians for promoting so-called fake Ayurvedic treatments, Western countries are right now attempting to digest and even patent neem. They're trying to sell neem as a superfood. They're trying to sell turmeric as a superfood. They're trying to sell ghee as a superfood. So if an Indian sells it, it's pseudoscience, but if a Westerner sells it, it's superfood. It's basically how they try to package crepes as some kind of really fancy food, when in reality it's just skinny pancakes. And it's not just limited to the Western world. Let's talk about algebra. Here's Obama talking about how Muslims invented algebra.
It was innovation in Muslim communities that developed the order of algebra.
Well, it's a good thing they weren't giving out Nobel Prizes for historical accuracy, because the Western mainstream credits the Arabs, and particularly Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a 9th century Muslim mathematician, for inventing algebra. The truth is that he was widely believed to have translated and expanded on Indian and Greek works that had previously been published. The subject of algebra originated in India all the way back in the Shatpat Brahman in 2000 BCE and in the Shulba Sutras between 800 and 500 BCE. The Indian name for algebra is Bij Ganit. And not just algebra. It is quite clear that Sufism has taken inspiration from Hindu practices, transcendental meditation, and the Bhakti movement. But Sufi saints will never give Hinduism that kind of credit because that will amount to blasphemy. See, this is the danger of cultural digestion. I want to state categorically that I'm not saying that only Indians should be allowed to practice Indian culture, Indian philosophy, or Indian sciences and practices. I believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. These are India's gifts to its entire family around the world. The world is our family and everybody in this family should be able to share these gifts. I don't believe that wearing Indian clothes or eating a samosa without taking the permission of the nearest Indian makes you some kind of a racist. I do not share that SJW position. What I'm saying is that on the one hand, you attack India for being a backward culture. You attack its culture. You say that India has not contributed anything positively to the world. You say that India needs a cultural overhaul. While at the same time, you carefully cherry pick positive facets from India, claim them as your own, and completely remove them from the Indian context. That does not involve mutual respect, sadly. This is the danger of cultural digestion and why I believe it's very, very important for Indians, not just in India, but around the world, to fight it. Do not let people remove yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda from the Indian context. The Indian people, the diaspora, and the Indian government must fight against cultural digestion tooth and nail. And I want to ask you, what do you think the Indian diaspora around the world and the Indian government can do to fight against cultural digestion and protect Indian practices and Indian culture from getting digested like the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks? Let me know in the comment section down below. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching today's video. Happy New Year once again. If you want to watch more videos, you can click over here. If you want to check out the latest Sham Sharma Show merch, click on the merch store link down below. If you want to join the Sham Sharma Show Mug Club, click on the Patreon link in the description down below. Other than that, I will see you for the next episode. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and to all of you, a very happy New Year and a very secular now.